I never thought the quiet hum of my apartment at sunrise could feel so heavy. The city outside my window was still waking up, soft orange light bleeding across the skyline, the kind my husband, Mark, used to photograph just to make me smile. I stood there in my silk blouse, smoothing the fabric down my ribs, telling myself today would be different, that the past wouldn't find me again. But then my phone buzzed. A single vibration, sharp, insistent, cut through the stillness. I didn't need to check the screen to know it was about her. My sister, Danielle. The same woman who stood at my husband's memorial with crocodile tears, a trembling voice, and the audacity to announce to everyone that she'd take care of everything. Everything. As if grief had handed her ownership of my life. I remember standing beside Mark's photograph that day, the scent of white lilies filling the room, my hands clasped so tightly my nails left crescent moons in my palms. She moved through the crowd, as if she were the widow, not me. And the irony? The life insurance payout, the one she shamelessly hinted about, was in my name alone. Now, as the phone buzzed again, rattling against the marble countertop, I exhaled slowly. I wasn't the fragile woman from that day anymore. I'd built something since then, something she knew nothing about. Still, her message forced the doors of the past wide open. Call me. It's important. Important. Danielle never reached out unless she wanted something. All right, I whispered to myself, picking up the phone. Let's see what you're after now. Before Mark, before the quiet strength I carry now, there was a version of me who tried far too hard to earn love from people who never intended to give it. Back then, Danielle and I lived in the same small town in Ohio, sharing a childhood roof but never a real bond. She was the golden one, confident, loud, effortlessly liked, while I was the quieter sister, the one who learned to survive in the shadows she cast. I remember the day everything snapped. I was 23, standing in our parents' living room with a suitcase that cost more than they thought I deserved. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the handle just to keep them steady. Danielle leaned against the doorway with her arms crossed, wearing that smirk she saved for moments she wanted to remind me of my place. So, you're really leaving? She asked, voice dripping with amusement. For what? Some job you'll quit in a month. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard. It's not just a job. It's an internship. A good one. In Chicago. She laughed, actually laughed. Please, Emily. You can barely keep yourself together. You think you're going to survive in a city like that? I felt it then. The hot sting behind my eyes, the ache in my chest, the familiar sense of being underestimated. My fingers trembled against the suitcase handle. I wanted to shrink, to disappear, to stop being the easy target she'd trained me to be. But before I could speak, a soft hand touched my elbow. It was my grandmother, sweet, silver-haired Evelyn, who had watched too many years of me folding myself small. With her other hand, she pressed a tiny velvet pouch into my palm. Inside was a simple gold pendant, worn smooth from decades of use. This belonged to my mother, she whispered. She wore it the first time she left home with nothing but courage. Whenever you doubt yourself, hold it. That tiny pendant felt impossibly heavy. Like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I looked up at Danielle, who rolled her eyes as if the gesture were nothing more than theatrics. Something inside me hardened, not anger, not defiance, but resolve. A quiet, steady kind. I'm going, I said, surprising myself with how even my voice sounded. Danielle didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was loud enough. I walked out that door with my grandmother's pendant warm against my chest, my heart thudding hard enough to echo in my ears. I didn't know who I would become or whether I'd fail, but for the first time, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward myself. Chicago didn't welcome me with open arms. It was loud, unapologetic, and stretched far beyond anything my small-town upbringing had prepared me for. My first apartment was a fifth-floor walk-up with creaking floors and a window that rattled whenever the wind got impatient. But it was mine. And for the first time in my life, my future felt like something I could shape with my own hands. The internship was at a mid-sized marketing firm, a place filled with fast talkers, sharper elbows, and an energy that made my pulse race. I arrived early every day, clutching my notebook, the gold pendant resting against my collarbone like a steadying hand. I wasn't the smartest or the boldest, but I worked harder than everyone, staying late long after the office lights dimmed and the city softened into nighttime. Still, the doubts crept in during those quiet hours. Nights when endless drafts and missed commas made me feel small again. Nights when Danielle's voice replayed in my head, "You can barely keep yourself together." Nights when I would close my laptop, press the pen in between my fingers, and whisper, "Just one more day." Everything changed when I met her. Marcia Turner. A powerhouse in heels, mid-50s, razor-sharp mind, soft heart. She saw something in me I didn't yet see in myself. "You've got instincts," she told me one evening after reviewing a campaign draft I was certain she'd tear apart. "Raw, but strong. Don't hide them." I blinked at her. Hide them? Instincts? I'd spent most of my life hiding everything, afraid someone would call me out for pretending to be more than I was. But Marcia pushed. She gave me real tasks, real responsibilities, real challenges. And when I stumbled, she didn't roll her eyes like Danielle would have. She showed me how to stand back up. I worked my way from intern to assistant account manager, then to strategist. The climb wasn't pretty. I had nights fueled only by cheap coffee and sheer stubbornness. I missed birthdays, ignored social events, and learned how to fix mascara smudges in office bathroom mirrors before big presentations. But the wins came slowly, then all at once. My first client who asked for me by name. My first campaign that turned a small brand into a recognizable one. My first bonus check that made me cry alone in my apartment because it was the proof I'd been waiting for. Meanwhile, back home, my family assumed I was barely getting by. They saw my quiet updates, the modest posts, the lack of details, and jumped to their usual conclusions. Emily's still figuring things out. She probably doesn't want to talk about her struggles. City life isn't for everyone. I let them believe every word. Not because I wanted revenge, but because peace is easier when people underestimate you. And through all of this, Mark arrived. Steady, kind, endlessly supportive Mark. The man who brought me homemade soup when he found out I'd worked 3 14-hour days in a row. The man who told me my ideas were brilliant before anyone else did. The man who, without trying, made me believe I was worthy of the life I was building. With him by my side, my world grew bigger, richer, more anchored. But even then, I never told my family the truth about my rising success. Not yet. Some truths needed the right moment. And one day, that moment came. The moment arrived sooner and harsher than I ever imagined. Mark had been gone for 3 days. 3 days of silence heavy enough to crush bone. 3 days of funeral arrangements, casseroles from neighbors, and a numbness that spread through my body like winter. I moved on autopilot through each hour, hearing people's voices without processing their words. His memorial was held at a quiet hall overlooking Lake Michigan. The room was lined with white roses, his favorite, and soft piano music drifted through the speakers. Photos of Mark filled the display table. Him laughing in the kitchen, him holding my waist on a snowy sidewalk, him kissing my forehead when he thought no one was looking. I stood there in a black dress I barely remembered putting on, feeling like a glass figurine one wrong breath could shatter. And then, Danielle arrived. Not quietly, not respectfully, but sweeping into the room in a dramatic navy coat, fake sympathy painted across her face. She hugged people like she was the grieving widow, whispering with exaggerated sorrow. She didn't even look at me before she announced loudly to a group near the refreshments, "Don't worry, everyone. I'm handling everything from now on. Emily needs support, and I'll make sure all of Mark's affairs are taken care of." I froze. Hands trembling, pulse pounding in my ears. People turned toward her, toward me, waiting for confirmation, for some shared narrative of sisterly closeness. But Danielle kept going, touching her chest as if the tragedy were hers. "I'll manage the estate, the insurance, all the paperwork," she said. "Emily shouldn't be burdened with these things." I told Mark I'd look out for her. My stomach dropped so violently I had to grip the edge of the table. People nodded sympathetically, and for the first time that day, I felt anger push through the fog of grief. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Mark had left everything in my name. Not hers. Not my parents'. Not anyone else's. After the memorial, when people started leaving, she approached me with that familiar smug concern. "You poor thing," she cooed. "Why don't you come home for a while? I can take over all the—" "Danielle," I interrupted, voice steady despite my shaking chest. "Stop." She blinked at me, surprised, maybe even offended. "Take over what? Exactly?" "All the financial stuff," she said, lifting her chin. "I know it's confusing. Life insurance can be tricky, and I know you and Mark didn't understand paperwork." I almost laughed. She truly had no idea. "Danielle," I said softly, "the life insurance policy is in my name. Only mine." The silence that followed was deafening. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. And for the first time in our lives, she had no script prepared. "What?" she whispered. I pulled a crisp envelope from my bag, the one the insurance agent handed me the day before, my name printed clearly on the front. "This is the payout confirmation." I held it out just enough for her to read my name. Her face drained of color. "You," she stammered. "But why you?" "Because I was his wife," I said, meeting her gaze evenly. "And because he trusted me." Her throat bobbed in a hard swallow. Around us, a few lingering guests pretended not to listen, but their stolen glances said otherwise. My parents stood near the doorway, their expressions frozen between shock and some warped sense of disappointment. Disappointment they didn't benefit from my husband's death. The air shifted. Something cracked open. Not in me. In them. That was the moment they realized the quiet girl they dismissed years ago was no longer a fragile shadow. And that was only the beginning. In the days following the memorial, the shock around my family didn't fade. It deepened. Calls came. Messages. Knocks on my door, I let ring out unanswered. Grief was still raw, still clawing at my ribs, but something else had awakened inside me. Clarity. For the first time, I saw every dynamic for exactly what it had always been. So when I finally invited them over, Danielle, my parents, even my uncle who never missed a chance to critique my life, I chose the setting intentionally. My home office. The room that held my real identity. My framed awards lined one wall, gold lettering catching the afternoon light. A glass desk overlooked the city skyline. Design mock-ups, brand campaigns, and signed contracts sat organized on shelves. Mark had painted the accent wall forest green because he said it made me look powerful when I worked. And it did. When they walked in, they all stopped. Every one of them. Eyes widening, mouths falling open just slightly. "Emily," my mother whispered. "You work here?" I rested my hands on the back of my chair. "For the last 5 years." Danielle stared at the award on the center shelf. Marketing Strategist of the Year. Her face drained again. You never told us." "You never asked," I replied calmly. They shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another as if searching for someone to blame for the decades of assumptions that suddenly made them look foolish. I took a breath, my fingers brushing the gold pendant at my neck, Grandma Evelyn's reminder that courage starts small. "I know why you're here," I said finally. "You want help. And I'm not against helping. But things are going to be different from now on." My father cleared his throat. "Different how?" I pulled out 3 envelopes. One for each of them. Their names written in my clean handwriting. Inside, I said, are the terms. Danielle snatched hers first. Of course she did. She skimmed it quickly, then looked up at me, stunned. "You're offering to help me start my business?" "Yes," I said. "But only under conditions." "Conditions?" she snapped. I met her glare evenly. "You drop the jealousy, the competition, the constant need to belittle me. You go to therapy, you work on yourself, and you stop taking credit for things you didn't do. If you want my support, you become someone I can respect." She opened her mouth, ready to argue. But then she saw something in my expression, something firm, unshakable, and her shoulders slowly fell. My mother opened her envelope next. Tears immediately welled in her eyes. "You want me to pursue something for myself?" she whispered. "Yes," I said gently. "You spent your whole life living through us. You never chased your own dreams. I'll fund your interior design certification program, but only if you commit to finishing it. No excuses." Her hands trembled as she held the letter. A different kind of trembling. A hopeful one. My father's terms were clear. "Retire," I told him. "You've worked yourself into bitterness. I'll help you settle your debts, but you will treat me with respect, genuine respect, going forward." Silence stretched across the room. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was transforming. Because for the first time, the power wasn't theirs. It was mine. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that demanded growth and offered it. "I'm willing to help all of you," I said softly. "But the old patterns end now." No one argued. Not this time. Change didn't happen overnight. But slowly, quietly, like sunrise slipping over the horizon, things began to shift. Danielle was the first. I didn't expect her to follow through with therapy. Honestly, I expected 1 or 2 sessions followed by a dramatic speech about how she was fixed now. But instead, she committed, week after week. And little by little, the sharp edges in her softened. She stopped competing with me in conversations. She stopped correcting me just to feel superior. Sometimes she even asked genuinely, "How are you holding up today?" One afternoon, she showed up at my apartment with a folder full of sketches, her business idea finally taking shape. There was humility in her voice when she asked for feedback, and for the first time in our adult lives, it felt like we were standing side by side, not one in front of the other. My mother enrolled in her certification program and sent me pictures of her assignments, color palettes, room mock-ups, mood boards that reminded me of the woman she once dreamed of becoming. She started calling me not to gossip or pry, but to share her progress, to ask about mine, to talk like we were both growing in our own directions. And my father, he retired. The man who once judged every choice I made began spending mornings walking by the lake, sending me photos of sunrises with captions like, "Mark would have liked this one." Grief softened him. Age humbled him. And respect, real respect, finally built a bridge between us. As they changed, I changed too. I allowed myself moments of stillness, of softness. I grieved Mark in waves, some gentle, some violent, but always with the knowledge that I was still standing because of the woman I had fought to become. The woman he believed in. The woman he loved. One evening, months after the memorial, I sat on my balcony with a cup of chamomile tea, wrapped in a blanket Mark used to cocoon me in on cold nights. The city lights shimmered below. The breeze was cool against my cheeks. My fingers drifted to the gold pendant resting against my collarbone, the same one Grandma Evelyn had given me the day I chose myself for the first time. I pressed it gently, feeling its familiar warmth. Her voice echoed in my memory. "Whenever you doubt yourself, hold it." I smiled, tears pricking at my eyes, not from pain, but from recognition. I had doubted myself 1,000 times, but I had held on. To courage, to love, to growth, to the quiet power no one saw coming. My family was healing. I was healing. Life was rebuilding itself, slowly and beautifully, like a mosaic pieced together with new colors. And as I looked out at the glittering city, my city, I whispered the truth I now carried in my bones. I don't rise to be seen. I rise because I finally know who I am. Top of form,